Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Unity Manifest. And today, our guest is Jimmy Ryan, and he is the author of California Dreaming Primal Screaming. And it looks like a really interesting book about his spiritual journey. Thank you for coming on today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Great. So, when I think about, at least from my own personal experience, you know, I think about like sex, drugs, and rock and roll are like the
Yeah.
precursor to a spiritual life, and I never saw it until recently. Like, even, drugs are like plant medicine, sex is the Kundalini, and the music is the vibration now, it just
Yeah.
pulls it all together.
Good for you.
Um,
I never made that connection. Yeah.
um, but that's what came to mind when I was looking at your profile,
Hmm.
when you sent me your information.
Sure.
So I'd love to hear about your story.
Yeah. Well, I've written two books. The first book was The Glitter in the Gloss. I spent, gosh, we're up to about 60 years working in the high end of the music industry, working with people like Elton John, Paul McCartney, Carly Simon. I was the guitarist on You're So Vain, and I'm happy to say it's in the top 100 of all time, and I got the solo on it. A bunch of people like that, Jim Croce, Cat Stevens. Um, that's the one side, and then after I did that, I started scoring for TV, NBC News, CNBC, things like that, doing big orchestral scores. Um, that was the good side. That was well, they're both good sides, but that was the side that everybody looks at, and goes, "Oh wow, man, you did that. That's so incredible, man. Your life must be absolutely amazing." And the other side of that is underneath all of that, there's something else going on. I use this expression. It comes from Bill Graham, the guy that founded the Fillmore East and the Fillmore West. And he was talking about the 27 Club, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, people who died at 27. He says, what do you do when you have everything you ever wanted and you're still not getting off? That was me. I had hit records when I was 19 years old. I dropped out of college to go on tour with my band, which had three top 10 records, but I was miserable. I had all this great stuff. I had fans. I had all this. I was what I affectionately call a captive Catholic. It was not an option. I was brought up in the Catholic religion. There was no arguing with it. Every Sunday I'd go to mass and listen to, whatever was going on. And I certainly had faith. I certainly believed in God and Jesus and all of that, but there was something that was off about it. And what was off about it for me was they were hammering me with beliefs that weren't truths. They were beliefs because if there's proof for them, then they're truths. And there's no proof that there's a heaven or hell. Nobody that I know has come back to say, "Oh yes, the harps and the angels and no one else has come. Oh man, it's really hot down here. You don't want to mess around." It's I reserve the idea that it's a possibility, but there's no proof. So I kept getting hammered with these beliefs, and this isn't sitting right with me. And I had a lot of fear around demons. Don't even think about Satan, man. He's gonna come and get you, dude. He comes in, he hides under your bed, and he's in your closet. And how did he get past the family dog without him barking? I don't know. Um, so eventually I broke with that, and it happened by and all of this is in the book. I was just in Barnes and Noble, and I was just walking through, and I happened to get into the comparative religions section, a little book stuffed in there called Hinduism. I said, Hinduism? Whoa, what the hell is that? That's a weird name. And I started flipping through it, and there's all these gods and goddesses. And I said, wait a minute, this is like totally antithetical to anything I've ever been taught. Lakshmi and Krishna and Vishnu and da 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 da. And I go, what is this? So I started not studying it, but I read it and I said, my God, and this is India, the largest country in the world, in terms of population. That means there are more people who don't believe in Christianity than people who do. And certainly Catholicism, which is a small division, not a small division, but a division of Christianity. I said, so who's right? And I didn't become a Hindu. I just became a religious in terms of organized religion. And that started this journey towards healing what was going on inside of me, which was a lot of discomfort, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, social anxiety. Crazy. I'm out there on a stage performing for thousands and thousands of people and have social anxiety. With all of that, I would still go to a party and not talk to anybody because I was just shy and unsure of myself. So what this book, California Dreaming and Primal Screaming, there's a little subtitle, Gurus and Psychics and Shrinks, Oh My. That's the little subtitle of the book. Is it's my journey through all the therapies that I went through to alleviate this pain, this discomfort. Now, I wasn't a psycho, and I wasn't suicidal. It was just this low grade pain that was there all the time. Otherwise, I grew up in a very normal family. Anyone would look at my family and say, "Oh, yeah, American normal family." Um, but I assert that all these all these normal American families, there's probably a lot under the hood that nobody knows about. There's a lot of discomfort and there's a lot of anxiety and there's a lot of neurosis. So the first step of the journey was primal therapy. You may remember that from John and Yoko. This was a spin-off in New York that I did, and it was just cathartic. To this day, I think it's one of the best things I ever did for my health. You can go, I'm talking a lot. If you have questions,
Mhm.
just
Oh, go
jump
ahead.
in
Keep
and
going.
stop me. Um, in primal therapy or this offshoot, they just called it group therapy. You'd be in there with a group and somebody would say, I want to work. And what that meant was they had something going on. In one of the cases I bring up in a book is a woman who started off saying, my husband just died of cancer. And Barbara Scher, this amazing person who's done TED Talks, she passed away a little while ago, but she was the facilitator of the group, said, okay, put that in words. And she started saying, I miss you, Bill. I think the guy says, I miss you. And she started crying, I miss you, I miss you. And then she started yelling, oh my God, I can't do it. And she's screaming. She is screaming at the top of the lungs, and people are holding her and rubbing her shoulders as she just screams, and she's just letting it all out. She's not trying to hold it in or be cool.
Hmm.
And she stops dead. I'm like, whoa, what just happened? And she started cursing. She said, you mother, you left me with all this responsibility. You just got out of the picture and left me holding everything. You son of a, and she started cursing her husband out like nothing I've ever seen. We're saying, what the hell is going on here? It's like it morphed into the Twilight Zone. I had no experience with this. This was on my first day. And in the end, she kind of calmed down and she had gotten to two very deep layers that she didn't even know existed. She certainly knew the pain of the sadness of her husband
Hmm.
dying. She didn't know to what extent it was going on. So when she started screaming, she really started feeling that deeply. But beneath that was absolute rage. She was furious that he died. Can you imagine that? Somebody, oh my God, you poor thing, he died. No, he was like, how dare he die?
I can
Which, like,
imagine.
what? But at the end of that, there was just this peaceful calm, and the tears had kind of dried up, and she was just at peace. And, she wished him well on his journey to the afterlife and said, I'll see you, at some point in the future. And it was over. She was just fine. Now that may
Hmm.
not have been all of it. She may have gone home, and a week later, some of the more sadness came up or more of the anger. But we do this every week. So if it did, she'd have a forum for dealing with it. And that was primal therapy. The one thing that I did that has lasted me my entire um, what shall I call it? Uh, Philosophical, psychological journey is transcendental meditation or some form of meditation. I started that in 1974 and I haven't missed a day since then.
That's good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm actually a TM teacher. Now, I didn't become a TM teacher because I wanted to teach people to meditate. I'm an engineer. I went to college for electrical engineering. I want to know how things work. So I did teacher training because I wanted to know how TM worked. I wasn't I wasn't satisfied with, just saying the mantra and then all this amazing stuff happening. I said, why? What are the mechanics of this thing? How does it work? Which I did. And I found out and I got a good grasp of it. But anyway, so there are a lot of stops along the way here. And again, I want to give you some room for questions because I could talk for 3 hours on this stuff and I don't want to.
So when back to sort of your story, like it sounds like you hit this point of emptiness where nothing was bringing you peace or comfort or whatever it is that we look for as human beings. Like we
Yeah,
seek it out through material stuff. That's what we grow up with. You
yeah.
know, and you know
What we're taught.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then we're also like you were mentioning the trauma, all that stuff, and doing that. But eventually, like I guess the next layer is like that spiritual layer. Like we realize that I don't know, this isn't all there is. There's more.
Yeah. There's what I've learned over the years is the peace and comfort does not come from the outside. And that sounds very abstract. Oh man, it's all inside you, and you just have to look inside and find that peace. Most people think about that. What are you talking about? What's inside is my stomach, my lungs, my heart. What are you talking about? You need to have I hate to use the word because it's so mechanical, but you need to have a technique for contacting what's inside you. You can't just make a mood of it. You can say, okay, I'm going to go inside. Okay, I'm going to feel peace now. You can't talk yourself into that. You either are there or you're not, or you're trying, but you're still pushing something from the outside to try and create something on the inside, while what's on the inside is always there if you get beneath it. And that gets into I studied with a spiritual teacher called Adyashanti, and I had been hearing about all this Vedanta, not Vedanta. I had what is the oneness Advaita? There it is.
Yeah.
Vedanta, Advaita. It's all Sanskrit words. I get a little mixed. Advaita, which is non-dual thinking. What does that mean? Non-dual thinking, man, dual. What are you talking about? There's a billion things out here. What's dual? One or the other? And it just basically means that there's a oneness that we all are,
Hmm.
and then there's duality, which is all these other things out here, the material world. So, you can hear that till you're blue in the face, and it doesn't mean anything until you have the experience of it. So what happened was I was on a long retreat with Adyashanti, and I'm hearing about this, and he's a fantastic lecturer. He's just a great teacher. He's retired now, but he was a wonderful teacher at the time, and talking about how this oneness, this wonderful what we are ism is always there. It's there now. It was there before. It's going to be there in the future because it never changes. And I just listen to it and I start to go to sleep. What the hell is he talking about? I got my body here. It changes every 5 seconds. I've got my mind, which is constantly flying around. So we were doing 3, 6, probably almost 9 meditations a day, 40 minutes apiece. That's a lot of meditation. And one day I woke up in the morning. This is going to sound bizarre to your audience, but I had no self. Now, what does that mean? Everything I associated with what was me was gone. And I want to tell you, it was one of the most enlightening is not quite the right word. It's exactly the word, but that's not the point I'm trying to make. It was like a backpack full of cement was taken off. It was as if a burden of nonsense, of just living in this noise that's in your head, this constant noise, the commentary, the commentator that's constantly talking to you, oh, you shouldn't do that. Oh, that's a good idea. Blah, 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 all the time had stopped. It had completely stopped. And the only thing that was there, I would call it me, but it was bigger than that. It was completely silent. It had no boundaries and there was no center point to it. It had no definition, so there was no physical center. There was no physical anything. And the only way I could describe the experience was there was no self. There was no individual me. Now, when you talk about we're all one, that's it.
Hmm.
That's what we're talking about. That experience of unbounded, just no boundaries, infinite, eternal. And I sat in this thing and I said, this is what they're all talking about. And, I went through the next 3 days walking around with no self. It was blissful. It was happy. It was carefree. And it ended. At the end of 3 days, back came the noise. But it was enough. And I've had that experience many times now. I can almost call it up when I want to. If I just stop for a second and just, excuse me, just allow it to be there, it just comes, not to the extent that it was on the course, because with 9 meditations, you go pretty deep. Um, but the silencing of the mental noise is such an incredibly refreshing experience. And then it leaves you with who you are. Now, when they say we're all one, this by definition means we're all one, because if it's infinite and eternal, it can't be a whole bunch of them. There are no two infinities. There are no two eternities. That by definition is one. And we're all the same self. We branch out into these egos and these individual bodies and minds, yes, but the essential me or I or we or whatever you want to call it, looking out through our eyes, that's behind all this nonsense, the observer, the witness, it's the same for everybody. And that was part of the experience. And that's what it means when we say we're all one. And unfortunately, it's just words unless you experience it. You can read Advaita till you're blue in the face. You can read the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita, the Torah, and all these things. But it's just words. It's all the menu. It's not the meal. The meal is having this experience. Now that was at the end of my journey, and I think part of the reason, and where I am now, but part of the reason that was possible is all the stuff I did up to that, because I worked really, really hard on getting rid of the neurosis with primal therapy, one-on-one therapy, EST. Remember EST? Do you remember that? Earhart Seminars training?
No.
Okay. Ask, well, it's nuts. It's in the book. Lifespring was another one. They're big seminars where like 200 people get together and there's a trainer there and he trains you and gets you to feel responsibility. And it was very effective. It was very effective, but it was tough. It was Marine, it was a Marine Corps kind of training, not physically, but mentally. I did that in Lifespring. I did hypnotic regression. Now,
Hmm.
that's a cool one. That's when that was uh, Dolores Cannon. I don't know whether she started it or
This is QHHT.
yes, yes, I did that too.
Yeah, that's the Dolores Cannons.
Yes, 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 yes. And then Michael Newton, that's the other one I was thinking of. His big specialty was Life Between Lives, and both of them discovered these by just doing regular hypnotherapy, and then somebody starting to talk about being in the womb. They go, "Oh boy, we've regressed you pretty far back." And then they start talking about before they were in the womb, and he's like, "What? What do you mean before you were in the womb?" And now they're talking about what it's like in between lifetimes. And, when you have this experience, out the window goes one lifetime. It's not a case of believing in reincarnation, it's experiencing it. It's a memory. I did 2 sessions of the Michael Newton stuff and one session with the QHHT. And in all cases, I went back to previous lifetimes, and it wasn't like I was making it up or looking and trying to look cool in front of the hypnotist or something. It was a memory. It was a
Mhm.
memory, just like, what'd you do yesterday? Well, I had lunch with my friend, and it was a memory. And in one case, I was a German pilot in World War II, World War One, and I had the experience of being an aristocratic um, pilot, honored by the German Air Force, which was very early those days. It was double wingers, and I was about 23 years old, and I was a ladies' man. I was doing great. I was handsome. I was smart. I was at the top of my class. I had shot down so many planes, and I went out on a sortie, flying over a place in Italy, and I heard an engine behind me. I said, "What the?" And I swung my head around. There's a Sopwith Camel behind me. That's a British double winger plane. And everything I did to try and shake him, I flipped the plane, I dived, the whole thing. I could not shake it. It was like he was on a tow rope and he shot
Hmm.
me down to kill me. And I experienced my death. And it wasn't painful. As I was going down, there was this feeling of, oh boy, okay, that's the end of this one. There wasn't fear because it was so inevitable. If there's any hope that you're going to live, then there's the fear. And then there's the crazy, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. But this was not that. This was, it's over. I'm in a double winger. I'm on fire. I've been shot personally. I've got bullets in my side. My plane is on fire, spiraling down. And I hit the hill, and all of a sudden, it was just everything around me was just beautiful. And it was just easy. And I was just floating in the light. And eventually, I got to this place that was kind of like Earth. And a gentleman came up to me and he said, well, that was kind of a wasted lifetime. I go, he says, you were there for spiritual development. You ended up being, you got laid an awful lot and you and you spent your life killing people. That wasn't the plan, dude. And I went, oh yeah, right, right. Now I remember. Oh man, why'd you put me in that situation? He said, well, you're responsible, and I had conversations with spirit guides and all kinds of stuff. And then they took me back even farther to the 1800s where I was a Roman Catholic priest. So that's kind of what this hypnotic regression is. It's absolutely fascinating, and I highly recommend it. The one thing I would say about it is it didn't change my life. It's not going to relieve you of um, lifelong neuroses or anything like that because it's information. In fact, it's memory. And just like any other memory in this lifetime doesn't cure you of anything, in a lot of cases it traumatizes you. It's not going to it's not going to change your life very much, but for one aspect, I no longer have any fear of death. Once you experience reincarnation through something like this,
Hmm.
you have the experience of this oneness, this eternal thing that is the essential you that's beyond the not be I guess beyond the body, but beneath everything. It's the foundation of everything. Once you have a solid experience of that, death is nothing. It's just moving to the next level. It's no big deal. So now, when you stop fearing death, a lot of other fears go away. A lot of other fears go away. Just all these things that you normally would find threatening, you're like, so what? You know? What's the worst? What's the worst that can happen? I can die. Yay. It's a horrible world. I'm happy to get out of here.
Yeah, well, that's not like how like I had a near death experience myself,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to come back, and I was mad that I came back. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, it hasn't necessarily for me. Like for a while, it definitely did take away the fear of death.
Mhm.
But it didn't take away my fear of suffering in between.
Ah, that's
This is
different.
that gap in between, like the next 30 years. I don't know.
Yeah, right. Right, 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 right. Pain, yeah, we're kind of naturally averse to pain. Pain and I won't say that, I've been cured of my fear of pain. Yeah, I don't like pain any more than anyone else. It's just the death thing that isn't such a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
mean,
think like what the Buddha was trying to teach us though is to not worry about that pain because we cause the pain in our own minds.
well, not when you're burning your hand with a soldering iron.
I don't know. Even that,
Oh, okay.
you don't think we can, you don't think we can like transcend physical
I
limitations
think some
through
people
our
can.
mind?
I think some people can. I'm not sure I can. I don't know. I was folding up a table the other day, and it had a thing like this that had to go down like that, and there was a little button you press to make it.
Oh.
And I'm pressing the button. Come on, get down. And then it went all at once and just slammed my thumb, and it went ah. It was really painful, and it ripped the fingernail back, and I don't want that. And it usually happens really fast. If you're talking about a long-term disease, that's one thing. But if you're talking about a sudden injury, you don't, you're, it happens too quickly for you to say, okay, I'm not going to feel this.
Right. Yeah.
No, you're going to feel it. You damn well going to be.
Hmm.
Afterwards, you can say, okay, I did that. It's stupid, but I don't really have to have an emotional reaction to this pain. That's all I can think. I mean, is that what you're talking about?
I think, I mean, yeah, I believe there are. I mean, obviously, there's some people that are can transcend pain. Like, I don't know if you ever read like Yogananda.
Of
Like,
course.
yeah, like he talks about all these gurus who can levitate and do all these miracles.
Yeah.
So I definitely believe it's possible, and you hear stories of even ordinary people having these extraordinary experiences. But my mind, like these things are not extraordinary, they're
Mm.
actually ordinary. I think humans have a lot more ability than what we allow ourselves to be.
Yeah, we're
And the
working on
reason and the
10%.
reason we're limited is because we're limited in our belief in what we can do.
Yeah.
If we can believe and from a different perspective or maybe a different way, then
Mm.
that will allow us to access some of these things that we previously thought were supernatural, like psychic abilities, telepathy, overcoming physical limitations. I believe it's definitely possible.
Yeah. The big question is how. And that's you can't there. Belief is a funny thing. You can believe you're going to be a millionaire. I did all the books, how to what was what was that book? How to Become a Millionaire. No, that was a TV show.
Oh, I know which one. How to grow rich.
Yeah, Think and
One.
Grow Rich.
Yeah, think and
And I
grow
went through
rich.
all this stuff and I didn't get rich, and I believed it and I believed it and I believed it. It's a matter of consciousness. You have to develop, it's a muscle, okay? It's a muscle just like, doing curls with weights. You can tell yourself 1,000 times over, I believe I'm going to bench press 400 pounds. But if you don't start by bench pressing 50 pounds and then 60 and then 80 over the course of 2 years, developing your chest muscles, your stomach muscles, everything it takes to bench press that, you're not going to do that. We have physical limitations, and I'm not saying what you're saying isn't possible. It's absolutely possible. I read Yogananda. It's just a big deal. It's a much bigger deal than people claim it to be. Yogananda was a highly enlightened person. Sri Yukteswar, way beyond anything I've ever seen. I mean, he's the guy who was in two places at one time.
Yeah, by location.
Right. But that's a big deal. And to get to that, you have to, I would say, meditate or do some kind of spiritual practice that develops your consciousness because there's so many layers of muck on top of your consciousness that you
Hmm.
got to get through before you can get at that stuff. So, yes, belief is a tremendous motivator in that, to believe in yourself and believe that you can do that, but do the work. You know, it's like the guy saying, "Lord, Lord, please, please let me win the lottery. I want to win the lottery." And the message is, buy the ticket. You you gotta you gotta do something. You gotta do something to initiate that, to develop it, to work it. It's like any other skill, and it's a skill, you know.
Absolutely. But I think I don't know. We do create. It's up to us how we frame things,
Hmm.
and that makes a big difference. you know well, I mean, what you're saying too about we have starting off small, working our way up through progressions. you know
Yeah,
but the other thing we were talking about, like the near death experience and your spiritual experience,
yeah.
one of the things I learned over like doing like all these episodes and interviewing different people
Hmm.
and experimenting with myself,
Hmm.
um that is something that I think is accessible to everyone.
Oh yeah.
Like when you mentioned like you got there through TM,
Well, TM
meditation.
and a whole bunch of other
But
stuff.
but but yeah, but there's like there's like all different modalities, and I think sometimes matching up the right people with the right modalities
Hmm.
is how to kind of assist people in accessing that type of
Totally agree.
consciousness.
Yeah. But you do need to do something.
Yes.
Just to sit in your chair and say, I believe I'm going to be enlightened. Good luck with that. Let me know
Yeah.
how that
Mhm.
goes.
Plus,
Uh,
like doing that kind of like saying you believe at that surface level is also saying you don't believe.
there you
You know what I'm
go.
saying?
There
Because
you go.
if you're doing it on a conscious level, there's always going to be that duality aspect.
You
You
got
know,
it.
it's getting that message into the subconscious mind where the
Mhm.
subconscious believes that that's the trick.
Yeah, yeah. The only reason you're doing that is because you aren't there. So you're actually affirming that you aren't there by saying you are.
Yes.
So you got a tug of war going on there. Yeah, I found it much more effective to just develop the silent consciousness silently through. And I'm not saying TM is the only way to do it. There's a lot of good meditations out there. TM is what I like about TM is it's structured, it's methodical, it's easy as hell to learn, and and there's a support system there for you. You learn it, and any problems you're having with it, like if you forget it, you forget your mantra, you forget how to do it, you can go to TM Center anywhere in the world and get your meditation checked, updated, the whole thing for the rest of your life. And that's pretty cool. The support system is there. Um, and it's easy. I mean, some people like just following the breath. Yeah, that works. That's not bad. But you need a little instruction around that because you're going to have thoughts. And people think that if they have thoughts, it's not working. Well, no, that's the natural tendency of the mind is to have thoughts. That's what it does. You just have to remember, oh, I'm having thoughts, and then just come back to the breathing. And you can go two, three meditations in a row where you never got to the breathing. You sat down and you're doing your daily to-do list and what happened at the
Mm-hmm.
office and my wife, blah, blah, blah. And the kids are, oh my God. And yeah, yeah, yeah. And then before you know it, 20 minutes is up and go, oh, wait a minute, I forgot to meditate. Not exactly. Just sitting there with your eyes closed and slowing down and not doing anything, you are turning the attention inward. Yeah, it's better if you catch the breath or you remember the mantra or whatever technique you're doing. But at the same time, you have slowed down, you have turned your attention inward, and you are eating away at whatever is in the between you and enlightenment.
Yeah, yeah. You still had a realization of that your mind is doing something, and you just
Sure.
observed it.
Yeah, you
That's
just
great.
caught yourself.
Huh? Yeah, I
Yeah.
can see my own
So
thoughts.
right, right. And the other thing is enlightenment is a big deal. Meditation teachers sometimes sell it. Anyone can do it. Anyone can be Maharishi. Anyone. Yes, that's true in this year or this lifetime or the next 30 lifetimes. It depends on where you are on the scale of consciousness, and you don't really know, and no one knows for you. But for the most part, to achieve what Yogananda achieved in Maharishi and all these and Buddha and all these things, that's a big deal. That's not ordinary. That is extraordinary. So, when I talk to people about meditation, not so much as a teacher, because I haven't taught meditation in years, but when I did, and I also mentioned this in the books, is manage your expectations. Just doing this will make your life better. I promise you it'll make your life better. You'll calm down, you'll feel better. But if you're talking about cities, which are Siddhis, which are the powers that Yogananda talked about,
Mhm.
it's a really big deal. And you got to dig through eons of muck to clear that space out so that those things can function. It's not easy. And that's why there are very, very few people out there that can do that. The yogis of the world, the true yogis. But that's okay. You can still make a much better life. You can still enjoy your life a whole lot more. And if you're farther along than you thought you were, you could fall into it.
Hmm.
It could happen for you. That is a possibility. But for the most part, I like, as I say, I like to manage expectations. Don't necessarily think you're going to levitate in the first 2 weeks.
Hmm.
It's probably not going to happen, but that's okay.
I kind
Everybody
of
will
come from the Zen perspective, and in
have-
Zen, one of the big things is like instant enlightenment.
Yeah, yeah,
Where it could happen to anybody at any time.
that is
and,
correct.
and and the reason that is and it goes back to that idea of oneness is because we are an expression of that oneness, and
Yes.
anybody has the ability to have that realization that we are that expression of the universe, like we're the universe experiencing itself.
Yeah. So why do you think more people aren't having that
I think more people are having it.
in terms of the population in terms of the 8 point something billion?
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I've interviewed a lot of people, and I think the interest in this it has grown exponentially.
I
I think
agree.
a lot of people see the opportunity because when a person expands their consciousness, you automatically expand the amount of choices you have.
Of course.
And that always benefits not just us as an organism, but it expands out into the world.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They actually did an experiment with TM. The theory behind it is if enough meditators in one group, if they're in large enough numbers, the crime rate starts going down around them. So they did an experiment in Washington, D.C. They called all the meditators from the United States. I don't know how many it eventually ended up with several thousand. And the police were just laughing their butts off. They say, "Oh yeah, Washington D.C. crime rate going down." They said, "Well, can we use your statistics?" And I said, "Sure, we'll help you with that. Afraid you're going to be embarrassed, but go ahead." Crime rate over 3 or 4 weeks, I don't remember how long. I was actually on this course, dropped 20% in Washington, D.C. in the heat of the summer where there's a lot of crime because nobody's staying inside because it's cold. It dropped 20% and the police had their jaws were on the floor. They said, "What the hell?" And they really looked into it to see if there was any other factor that could be responsible for it, and there wasn't. So what's what's going on is we just need more people doing this. The more people who are developing themselves spiritually, the better the world gets. And when they're concentrated in one area, the much better the world gets. And it spreads out, it's kind of like the inverse square law. As the farther you go out, the more it reduces from the
mhm.
center of this consciousness thing. But I don't disagree with you. Yes, everybody has this ability. There's no question about it. But we are so conditioned to look outside of ourselves. It's such a habit. It's just the billboards, the TV, the phones, the computers. We're always looking, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. We're always looking out um, for that enjoyment, for that peace. That's what's got to get reversed. Yes, we have that ability, but you have to turn inward. It's not out there. And if you're looking for it out there, you're going to be disappointed. So, yes, yes, we do all have that ability. And the Zen thing is true. It absolutely can. But um, there's certain prerequisites, I think, for that instantaneous transformation. And it doesn't happen often because we're surrounded by this. There's another thing that some of the people in the TM movement were talking about recently because people were complaining because they'd been meditating so long and they weren't really having the experience that they wanted to have. And he said there could be a building across the street with letters on it as clear as can be, and the whole thing. He said, and you could have perfect 20/20 vision. But he said, if there's a pea soup fog, you aren't going to see a damn thing. And he said, the pea soup fog I'm talking about is world consciousness. As long as the world consciousness is about war and wealth and consuming and hurting people and me first and all, he says, as long as that stress fog is surrounding you, it's going to be a little difficult to see the consciousness, to see that self, to see that pure thing that you are, if we could call it a thing. It's hardly a thing. It's eternal. Um, and they said that's the issue. He says, tell your friends, start meditating. Get everybody to start some spiritual practice. It doesn't have to be this, it doesn't have to be that. It Kundalini, it can be yoga, it can be meditation, it can be whatever, but do something. And that'll be helpful. So as far as the instantaneous thing, yeah, if the fog clears, some people are so powerful that they got through it anyway. There's plenty of them are alive. There's Adyashanti, Gangaji, God, I can't think of a million more, but there have been a lot of them in the 20th century and whatever. Lucky them. You know, most of them have studied under teachers, though. Eckhart Tolle was okay. There's your Zen guy right there,
Yeah.
sitting on a park bench, lost his job, miserable, and then bong, hit him. He's wide awake. That's your Zen guy. There he is.
Yes.
That's your Zen guy. I love Eckhart. He was one of the lucky ones who, his life was in the crapper, and then just all of a sudden he woke up. You know.
That's kind of how it goes sometimes, though.
Sure.
You got when you reach that point where there's nothing else, like the Janis Joplin song, when you have freedom is just another word for having nothing left to lose.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
It's also like in a spiritual path too. Like when you reach that point of pure desperation, you're like, well, why not just dedicate my life to something good?
Yeah.
Because everything else didn't work.
Yeah. Well, yeah, yeah. And hopefully you don't have to go that far that you're homeless and sitting on a park bench because, having lived in New York, there's a lot of homeless people who are not enlightened. They did not, they did not have that awakening. They just went farther and farther into despair and solved their problems with the bottle. Not exactly a way to to wake up. That's dulling the nervous system.
Mhm. Do you have that same opinion of like people that use psychedelics to reach altered states of consciousness for enlightenment?
I can't criticize that in general, but I think the brain is a very delicate thing. It's a billion nerve cells, tiny microscopic cells, and you're putting this very, very powerful chemical into your body and forcing your brain to alter how it works. I tried it a couple of times and it didn't go well. I don't know about anyone else, but what I've heard and what I've experienced is what people see when they're tripping is still part of the relative. The relative being anything physical, and I mean physical in all dimensions. I
Uh,
don't physical, hard physical, but people.
so you didn't do it with a blindfold,
I didn't do it. What?
wearing a blindfold.
No,
Oh
not at
yeah.
all.
I
That's
did
the
it with I had to work a way around the visual distractions.
okay.
Is
Okay. Um, but what I'm saying is the possibility of, well, what are you going to see? Because what I'm talking about is dimensionless. It's not cornucopias of spiraling light and all that stuff. That's still relative.
yes, it
Still
is
part of the relative world.
very much.
Yeah, that's not spirit.
No.
Spirit is undefined empty. It's a void. It's an eternal,
Hmm.
infinite void. And that's a very different experience. My experience with acid was a very funny experience. I talked about it in my first book. Um, uh, I don't even remember the name of my first book. That's where my brain is right now, my memory. Uh, but I did acid on the with a I was doing a Carly Simon project where we were playing at the British home of the head of entertainment for Playboy International. So basically, we were invited to a Playboy party. And Andy Newmark, our drummer, and Andy came into my room, my hotel room, and says, "Hey, you want to do something wild?" And I'm like, "What?" And he said, "Want to drop acid before we do this show?" And I went, yeah, okay, I guess." I don't know. So we dropped our acid, and by the time we got to the party, we were buzzing, and I didn't know where I was, what I was doing. I was just completely like, "Whoa, what is this?" And it came time for us to play. And Carly hadn't done anything. She doesn't do drugs at all. She's too paranoid. She has a lot of fears that even pot makes her nuts. So she knew what was going on. She says, "All right, just follow me up the stairs. We're going to perform in this guy's bedroom, okay?" That's how the Playboy thing works. Everything in the room. And we got up there and I was playing a 12-string guitar. And thank God I had tuned it earlier because I don't think I'd have been able to tune it. I was so out. And I got up there and I'm
Yeah.
looking at this. What is this thing in my lap? It's got things that look like keys and strings and dots on the net. What is this thing? That's how far gone I was. And I picked the thing up and she started playing the song and my hands just started playing the song. And I go, look at that. Look at what my hands doing. And I wasn't doing it. The hands, there was just enough muscle memory to get through it. And I played fine. But another funny situation. This room was crammed. There was probably 60 people in this bedroom. And there were some movie stars there. And what did I know? I'm sitting on the edge of the bed trying to play, and this guy slams into my back, and I'm kind of curse under my breath a little bit. And he reaches around, he has a joint in his hand, and he shoves it in my mouth. All I saw was a fire-breathing dragon. I like that. So I smacked him as hard as I could and knocked the thing out of his hand, sent him tumbling over backwards. That was Roman Polanski. And he's laughing his butt off. He thought it was the funniest thing in the world and going on and on about Britt Eklund. And I mean, who's Britt Eklund? Britt Eklund was sitting on my right side. It was that kind of party. And I just I couldn't grasp it. I couldn't relate to it. So the final experience was I was down in the living room and the paintings were all porno. That's the Playboy world. In the Playboy Mansion, they were tasteful. They were erotic, but they weren't porno. In Victor Lowndes' place, they were porn. He's the Hugh Hefner's partner. And I'm looking at him like, my God, that's a Picasso. That is a Picasso painting. Porn. So then I see this other painting, and it's just kind of an ordinary landscape. But it's weird. It has this carved elf, like the Keebler elf, the little guy with the hat, and like one of
Mhm.
the seven doors. And it's carved, so it's sitting on the frame, and there's this landscape in the background. I said, "What a weird." Yeah, everything here is weird. So who cares, you know? So I just disregard it. And then I meet Andy across the room, and I said, "Hey, did you see that painting?" He says, "Which one?" I said, "The one with the elf on the thing." He said, "No." He said, "Yeah, come on over. I want to show it to you." We walk over. No elf. I'm going, no way. I hallucinated that. I mean, it was so real. I could touch it, take his hat off, like a little wooden carving, and I get back there and it ain't there. So, with that experience, and then another experience of doing mushrooms, where all I could do after I did them was throw up, I just said, this isn't for me. This is not the path to enlightenment. Now, I don't want to put down anybody else's experience. A lot of my friends have done ayahuasca. Um, I don't know much about that, but it supposedly opens your mind to something, that they think is valuable. One of my friends has been down to Peru 3 times doing it. Eh, my experience tells me that's for other people. So
Right.
anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely, I mean, it's not the same as like doing it as a kid. Like when I was a teenager, I was
Mhm.
going to like Sabbath concerts and taking mushrooms and stuff like that. You know,
Yeah,
as an adult, completely different. There's different intention. You know how to set the environment, get rid of the visuals.
sure,
You
sure.
know, and use it in a different way. And it's one of those things too. I think it doesn't have to be repeated all the time
Hmm.
because afterwards, when done right the right way, there's like an integration period where you're kind of just
Hmm.
processing everything, and
Yeah.
it's not visuals or anything like that. Usually it's emotional stuff.
Hmm. But again, still in the relative, you know,
Yes, yes, but we get past that relative quicker that way to
when you
make
do
it to
it.
the absolute.
Sure,
Right,
sure.
the more of that stuff we get rid of or clear up or heal
100%.
from,
Yep.
the closer we get to being able to have those enlightenment experiences.
Right. And make it permanent. And make it
Yes.
permanent. That's the goal. And that was the whole goal of this journey that I've been on, that I've described in the book. Just to remind your people, California Dreaming and Primal Screaming, little shameless plug,
Mhm.
uh, which is all the things that I did to get to this point. Now, Am I a fully enlightened being? No, not at all. But I have certainly had the experience, and I have it often enough to know that probably in this lifetime it's going to crack. But it took work.
Mhm.
It didn't happen in 2 days, and it didn't happen in 2 years, and it didn't happen in 20 years. I've been doing this 60 years. And I'm finally starting to get the kind of results that, I feel good most of the time now. I'm not walking around neurotic. I'm no longer shy. And all those things that were bothering me so much as a teenager and a young adult and even into my 30s and 40s, they're just gone. They've just evaporated. And that's wonderful. That comes from doing the work. And I'm not bragging about that. I'm just saying that when you put in the work, results do show up. It takes some patience. It doesn't happen overnight, but yeah,
So you no longer suffer through petty fears.
not a lot. Not a lot. I mean, petty fears, no. Big fears, trying to think if I have any big fears. Um,
I mean, fears, those fears sort of go away too. Don't you think it's getting older?
yeah,
Because as you get older, you're like, all right, I've made it this far now. So,
yeah, yeah, that didn't happen. All the times I thought that was going to happen, it kept not happening.
yeah. So
Oh,
just getting older, some of it takes away some of that.
yeah. I mean, I had a childhood fear of ghosts. I had a childhood fear of Satan. You even think about Satan and he's in you. You're inviting him to come into you. And oh my God. The nights I would just stay up shivering in bed, with fear. And my mother telling me things like, don't even think about him. If you think about him, he will come to you. Well, yeah, don't think about an elephant right now. You know, that's the worst thing you can tell a kid. God bless my mother. Uh, she had the best interests for me, but misguided, unfortunately.
Yeah, the religion's tough to overcome.
Yeah, that was a big thing to overcome. The Catholic indoctrination is very deep. It's very deep and and it can be very frightening. I mean, there's the beautiful side of it. Jesus loves you and Mary and all the good Jesus did. And I don't discount any of that. However much of it is actually true. And it's hard to say what is true because none of it was written down till 150 years after he died. And you know what can happen when people hand things
Mhm.
generation after generation through just telling stories. It can change a bit. But if half of it's true, he was an amazing avatar. However, the institution that purports to represent him, not so much. you know, Especially today. I mean, Christianity today, I got to be careful here. Um, I think they could do a little more reading on the works of Jesus and start opening up their hearts a little bit. I feel like the
Yeah.
hearts of certainly the Christian nationalists are a little bit closed. They're kind of cherry picking it a little bit, thinking of the things that they think are important and disregarding everything else. Charity, um, the poor, being kind to the poor instead of sending them to countries that they don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I like all like most religions, I think try to sell that, you know. I don't know. I just think I was afraid of hell too as a kid, terrified me, because I had all kinds of bad thoughts in my head. Oh,
Sure,
I'm gonna
sure.
go to hell for this. And but now I believe I don't know, we create our own, in this life.
Oh
Because
yeah,
I know after this life, it's completely different. It's pretty neutral out there.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
in this life, if you're kind to people, you get to experience maybe a better life.
yeah.
If you're a cruel person, life will be cruel back.
Right. You're always looking over your shoulder. If
Mhm.
you're a horrible person, you're mean to everybody, you got to watch out because somebody's going to have a knife ready to go into your back at any given moment. But if you're kind to people, it's less likely. It's not completely unlikely, but it's a lot less likely. Yeah.
So it's been a pleasure having you on. But before we wrap it up,
Yeah.
um, you want to pitch your book where people can find you.
Sure. The book is California Dreaming and Primal Screaming. It's a fun book. It's I don't proselytize at all. There is no pushing anything. It's simply a often hilarious, sometimes like, what the hell were you doing there? Kind of experience, with psychics and with the occult and things like that. That's not the bulk of it. That's just two chapters. But it talks like what it's like to go through these therapies. And the message of the book is do something. You know, don't sit on your sofa and hope you'll get better. You might, but it's highly unlikely. Do something. Take up a spiritual practice, a psychological practice, whatever, and start improving your life. And as I say, it's a fun book. It's not a an intellectual thing by any means. It's a journey. It's an adventure. And I've tremendous reviews so far. It's sitting at 5 stars on both Barnes and Noble and Amazon. And hopefully, your watchers or listen. Is this a video or?
I'm putting out both. Yes,
Oh, very
audio
good.
and video.
Okay. Hopefully, your watchers and listeners will find something interesting in it. It's hard not to. It's an adventure. Sometimes it's an edge of your seat adventure.
Mhm.
Um, but mostly it's just I do it in the first person. So you're sitting right with me in all of these therapies and experiencing what it's like to work with people on this level. So yeah, it's kind of fascinating in that regard. He says, patting himself on the back.
Right.
Yeah,
Great.
California Dreaming and Primal Screaming.
And I'll put
Available
it.
on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere. It's released internationally, so it's anywhere books are sold.
All right. And I'll put links to your books in the notes of this episode.
Thank
And
you.
do you have a website too?
I do. Rampage Music.
All right. I'll put a link to that also.
Rampage. Well, it's on my probably in the correspondence. I've got it somewhere in the
Yeah.
thing. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you for being on. It's been a pleasure having you as a guest. And
Thank
just
you.
hang on for one moment while I play the outro.